In August of 2023, one of my best friends killed himself. For 2 months following his death, I experienced intense grief that came unpredictably in waves. I would cry for my entire 40-minute commute to work. While working at my desk, if I heard something that reminded me of him, I'd start tearing up and have to go to the bathroom to breathe. He was in my thoughts all day long. When I found out how he died, I just couldn't stop imagining him dying. I journaled to try and make sense of it all. I consulted Google with all kinds of questions about suicide and how it affected those it left behind, and I was stuck blaming myself for not having reached out sooner or spending more time with him. I fluctuated between shock, denial, guilt, sadness, and frustration. The world felt wrong, and it seemed like life would never go back to normal. But it did. Slowly, insidiously, until I would think about him and not feel like sobbing. Eventually, I began to think of him happily, and find peace in his decision to end his own suffering.
It felt wrong that I wasn't upset by it, and yet I can't imagine that he would have wanted me dwelling on it forever anyway. You know, by this point he probably would have written a song about it if the roles were reversed and I was the one who killed myself, leaving him to pick up the pieces. After all, he was an incredibly talented musician. So now here I am, 6 months later, attempting to pick up the pieces of his death and make sense of him not being here and move on with my own life. So here's what I've learned from losing a very close friend to suicide. First of all, you're not alone. For every person that dies by suicide, there are dozens, if not more, people that are left behind who are now facing really difficult emotions, and they're facing existential questions about life that they had probably been ignoring up to that point. And if that feels daunting, then just reach out to somebody. Chances are there's someone in your life that you know who has had someone of their friends, family, loved ones die by suicide. Personally, when I reached out to talk to some coworkers as well as a couple friends, there were a few of them that actually did have some, close relationships that had ended because of suicide, and that really helped me to feel not so isolated in my own grief and my experience of this really difficult time. And if that feels too daunting, there's lots of great online forums and communities where people talk about their experiences with this, and you can also find books and other YouTube videos on it, and it's something that a lot of us deal with. And in addition to all of that, I highly recommend that you look into the 5 stages of grief. When I looked at that, it was really easy for me to see which stages I was in, and it helped to kind of put words to the feelings that I was having that I was very confused about. Now, secondly, journaling is an incredibly useful tool in processing grief, and it was really helpful for me. Personally, it feels like when I'm journaling, it's kind of like recording a captain's log in Star Trek, where it's like I'm having a one-way conversation with my future self, whether that's the version of me that's going to be reading over the entry when it's freshly written, or the version of me 6 months later that's reading it back. So the main reason that journaling is so helpful is because it's an outlet for me to say the things that I desperately want to say, but don't feel ready to tell anybody else, not even my therapist. But of course, there's more benefits than that. I don't know about you, but whenever I just sit and stew in my own thoughts, I tend to kind of go in loops where I keep repeating the same phrases over again, or I'm just seeing the same imagery again and again. And journaling is a chance for me to take that cyclical, just repetitive thinking and put it to a more linear ABC approach where I can just take that train of thought and logically and linearly follow it through to a conclusion, whether that's coming up with some action steps to, change something, or to simply just feel better about the situation.
As an example of journaling's powerful benefits, here are 2 excerpts from journal entries that I wrote in the aftermath of my friend's suicide. September 1st, hollow, the day after finding out about his death. The main emotion I felt was not sadness, but guilt. I feel it still, accompanied by the shadow of sorrow looming over my heart, waiting until my desire to change his fate loosens its tight grip, and I allow the wave of tears to overtake me. But for now, while I'm numb, my soul is content with carving a basin into my being where, when the time is right, all of my grief can be poured down into it. September 5th, at the edge, the following work week. I desperately want to feel my sorrow, in its entirety, in its salty, damp depths. I want to hear my wails without contempt, and yet I can't bring myself to take the plunge into my own abyss. I'm afraid that I will feel pain I'm not ready to handle. I'm afraid that if I start to let go and allow my tears to flow freely, that I won't be able to stop. I'm afraid that I'll hate myself even more. I'm afraid that everyone will abandon me, or pathologize me, or simply think I'm pathetic and weak. And so, I always make sure the lock is tight on the chest that holds my broken heart. Even though I know that this unfelt pain is poisoning my soul, I never allow myself to fully feel it. How do I stop this? How do I surrender to myself? The only one I'm running from is me. Shortly after writing this second entry, I shared how I was feeling with my girlfriend. It was terrifying, putting myself in such a vulnerable position, but by doing so, I was able to release the pain that I had been holding back. I cried deeply, she cried with me, and after 15 minutes, I felt lighter. The heartbreak was still there, but the self-judgment about my own sorrow was far less present.
So whether it's processing grief or really any other difficult, intense life experience, journaling has been really helpful to allow my monkey mind to find a way to take all of that mental mess and just have a straight path towards some type of understanding. Thirdly, poetry is a really powerful tool to process grief and other difficult emotions, and I've personally used it quite a bit in my own journey with grieving the loss of my friend. And with poetry, it's different than journaling in the sense that there's not an end goal in mind. There's not a specific destination you're trying to get to. It's more so, rather than trying to organize that jumbled mess in your mind, you are taking that jumbled mess as it is and just validating it, finding an artful way to express it, and just share it with yourself and other people. Now, I've personally found that poetry has helped me to articulate in writing a lot of very difficult feelings that were sometimes a little bit too complicated and messy for me to approach with journaling. And as a result, I've been able to come up with some really beautiful art to kind of celebrate those experiences and those feelings. And now I can read back and feel satisfied that there is that piece of beauty that I've created as a result of that really difficult experience. And if I choose to, I can share it with other people. And I've found that when I do share these poems with other folks, it really strikes a chord in their heart the way that reading a journal entry just simply wouldn't.
Here are a couple of untitled poems that I wrote to process my grief. My sadness loves to dance in the heavy rain of my tears. I can't write tonight. The words just keep leaking from a hole in my heart. In these short poems, I give form to painful feelings that yearn for validation and acceptance. They aren't trying to go anywhere or fix anything. They are simply declarations of my felt experience at the time. And lastly, here's the poem that I read at my friend's funeral, which I actually wrote back in 2020 as part of my book, Nature's Wisdom, A Journey Through the Four Seasons, which you can buy on Amazon. I read it in an Irish accent at the funeral because I also used to read these poems with my friend and some of our other mutual friends together in an Irish accent. Tidings of Autumn. Alas, the sweltering heat of midsummer days have passed. The once lush green pastures have all but turned to gold, and harvest time is nigh as the nights are turning cold. Yet the spirits of the valley still frolic through the forest, and as I seek solace amongst the trees, I can hear a delightful cricket chorus, a sound that surrounds me in serenity. Here and there I spot a flaming leaf amongst the deep green canopy, a harbinger of the chilling times to come. Soon each branch will have not even one. No one thing forever lasts. All of us will one day be but remnants of a long forgotten past. Just as every flower fades and loses its vibrant hue, we shall return from whence we came, it's true.
After I'd shared that poem at the funeral, several of my friends' family members came up to me and thanked me for reading it. And really was a testament to the power of poetry to bring people together over shared experiences and feelings. And some of these people were complete strangers that I had never met. A lot of them had even flown all the way across from the Atlantic, from the UK. just to be there for the funeral. So poetry is a really powerful tool for processing things for yourself and then also sharing that with others if you so choose to. So lastly, I just want to explore grief from a few different perspectives. So one of my absolute favorite poems on sadness by Robert Frost, he really personifies sorrow in a way that when I first read it, it really helped me transform my relationship to that emotion. And after we dive into it together, I'm sure you'll see why.
My November guest. My sorrow, when she's here with me, thinks these dark days of autumn rain are beautiful as days can be. She loves the bare, the withered tree. She walks the sodden pasture lane. Her pleasure will not let me stay. She talks, and I am fain to list. She's glad the birds are gone away. She's glad her simple worsted gray is silver now with clinging mist. The desolate, deserted trees, the faded earth, the heavy sky, the beauties she so truly sees, she thinks I have no eye for these, and vexes me for reason why. Not yesterday I learned to know the love of bare November days before the coming of the snow, but it were vain to tell her so, and they are better for her praise. Prior to reading this poem, I looked down upon so called negative emotions and did my best to keep them bottled up and hidden away. After reading his poem, I began to view them not as nuisances, but as guests simply looking for companionship and validation. Not only that, but these emotions allow us to perceive beauty that we often overlook when we are constantly trying to suppress them.
So by now, if you're still feeling uncomfortable with the idea of grief, I'd like to dive into a short poem by the 19th century American poet Vachel Lindsay, so that we can break through that facade of machismo that you might still be clinging onto.
Rain. Each storm-soaked flower has a beautiful eye, and this is the voice of the cold stone sky. Only boys keep their cheeks dry, only boys are afraid to cry. Men thank God for tears, alone with the memory of their dead, alone with lost years. I came across this poem while reading The Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart, a poetry anthology by Robert Bly specifically for men. Robert Bly has decades of experience facilitating men's work, and poetry has been a valuable tool in his practice.
What I like about this poem is that it's concise and it gets straight to the point. Being a man does not mean that you don't cry. Quite the opposite, actually. So the reason that boys are afraid to cry is that because they feel that they're not ready to handle that emotion. And much like in my journal entries, they feel that they're going to be rejected if they do actually end up crying and expressing their emotions. Men, on the other hand, approach grief and tears and sadness with humility and bravery, knowing that these emotions are perfectly natural to the human experience.
I want to close out this video with a passage from Robert Bly himself. In the introduction to the chapter, I Know the Earth and I Am Sad in the Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart, he writes, Depression is sometimes the entrance to soul, melancholy a wide road to God, and ordinary grief a door that when swung wide opens into feeling. Men often enter genuine feeling for the first time when in deep grief, after cheerfulness and excitement have failed for years to bring them there.
So these most painful feelings are often avenues through which we can derive intense meaning that is far deeper than that which we can get from the superficial lives that we have via sports, video games, sexual escapades, acquiring wealth in our materialistic modern society. It's a kind of feeling that forces us to reorient ourselves in the world and really reevaluate what it means for us to live a good and fulfilling life and what's actually important to us. And it's sometimes even a possibility to reconnect with the divine.
He goes on to say, the growth of a man can be imagined as a power that gradually expands downward. The voice expands downward into the open vowels that carry emotion, and into the rough consonants that are like gates holding that water. The hurt feelings expand downward into compassion. The intelligence expands with awe into the great arguments or antinomies that men have debated for centuries. And the mood man expands downward into those vast rooms of melancholy under the earth, where we are more alive the older we get, more in tune with the earth and the great roots. Grief and the so-called negative emotions that accompany it can be an initiation into a more grounded, compassionate, and wise form of masculinity.
If you've watched this far into the video, I want to personally thank you. Discussing suicide and loss is a very difficult subject, and I just want you to remember that you're not alone. It's okay to cry, and it's okay to miss someone that is never going to come back to you.
You may have noticed that I centered my exploration of suicide, grief, and loss around masculinity and male perspectives. That's not because I discount the opinions of women, but rather because I'm a man myself, and was at one point a teenage boy who struggled with all sorts of questions of what it means to be a man. I also see that there is a deficit amongst men in the US regarding our capacity to feel intense emotions and support other men who are feeling such emotions. It is my intention in sharing this video that I can help other young men out there find healthy ways of relating to their emotions and, of course, to find meaning in their grief and loss that comes after losing a loved one to suicide.